Alright, howdy folks, welcome back to the channel and to this Escape from Tarkov video, or should I say Escape from Cheatcov. Now I've not made a ton of videos about Tarkov because I've long viewed this as a game that I play to relax, as much as that's probably not a word a lot of people associate with this game because of how stressful it can be sometimes. However, even as a more casual player, I really felt like it was time to talk about Tarkov's cheating epidemic and the latest bit of news that has basically set the entire Tarkov community ablaze. First, I'd like to give a huge shout out to fellow content creator Goat, who has definitely opened my eyes with his latest video, and you can find that linked in the description, and I'd highly suggest checking it out after watching this video. In short, he himself installed cheats and played 125 sessions of Tarkov, and he claims that in 60% of his sessions, there was at least one obvious cheater. Now, I'd like to state that I normally do not condone cheating or hacking to get ahead of other players. However, he set a bunch of ground rules for himself. One of them being that he would never kill another player. I believe he acted more like an undercover journalist trying to expose a bigger issue, and that he wasn't using these cheats to just make content for his channel. Now, I've added timestamps to this video, so feel free to skip to the parts you find the most interesting, but I'd first like to take a second to dive into the basics of Tarkov, which will help explain why this game has so many people willing to cheat. And then we'll talk about what I think the two very different types of cheaters are, and the actual reason that one of these types of cheaters exists may surprise you yet. So Escape from Tarkov is a quote hardcore story-driven MMO featuring elements of first-person shooters and role-playing games as per their Twitter bio. Personally, I think calling Tarkov a realistic or tactical first-person shooter with some RPG elements would honestly be a sufficient summary. I think it's important to understand how Tarkov works and what potentially drives people to cheat in this game, so let's give you a very quick EFT crash course. Tarkov's main gameplay revolves around its raid system, where you equip your character with gear, weapons, armor, ammo, etc., and you are dropped into a map with up to 16 other players and a bunch of NPCs. Your final goal is to make it to one of the extraction zones on the map. This will allow you to leave that map and take your gear back to the main menu. If you happen to die while in a raid, you will lose any equipment you entered with and any gear or equipment you happen to find or loot off of other players during your time in that raid. Tarkov has a very low time to kill, with shots to the head or face being almost always instantly fatal besides a very few specific cases. Even if you're wearing some of the best body armor in the game, a few shots with the highest armor penetrating ammo can kill you in basically an instant. This makes the game very unforgiving to new players or players who just aren't as seasoned in the FPS genre. You can easily spend 15 minutes in the menu modifying your gun, one of Tarkov's most beloved features, and kitting out your character, and then lose it all in the blink of an eye less than 1 minute into a raid. This brings me to the first type of cheater, the cheater who wants to feel good at the game. They want to kill other players, take their gear, without having to worry about Tarkov's rather unforgiving gameplay loop. They might be able to fly around the map, be invincible, have unlimited ammo, perfect aim, generally anything that gives them an edge over legit players in a firefight. This is a type of cheater that you see in pretty much any game involving player versus player interactions, and is definitely not a cheater type unique to Tarkov. I do, however, think that players might be more inclined to be this type of cheater in Tarkov when compared to other FPS games due to how much Tarkov demands of the average player. Being successful at Tarkov requires you to have a lot of game knowledge. Having above average aim will help for sure, but if you don't know the in-game maps, where you may run into NPCs, where other players spawn at the start of raids, how effective your ammo is against certain armor levels, you just won't make it very far. Tarkov has a huge learning curve without any onboarding or in-game tutorial, and very simply said, cheating will make the game a lot easier for new or lazy players. You don't have to learn where players or NPCs spawn if you can basically see them throughout the map with ESP or radar cheats. Now, based on Goat's testing, encountering this sort of cheater, sometimes also called rage cheating, isn't nearly as common as encountering what I believe is the other type of cheater seen in the game. But before I talk about that type of cheater, you have to understand the following about Tarkov and its so-called wipe cycles. Tarkov wipes all of their players' progress and inventories every 6 to 7 months. Now, using this chart, we can see the duration of the last 5 wipes, and figure out that the average wipe length was about 189 days. So we take the last wipe, which was December 28th, and add 189 days. The next wipe will likely take place around July 5th of this year. So in just about 4 months from now, any and all progress you've made regarding your character's skills, story quest completion, anything will be completely reset to 0. You might be wondering what drives people to risk being caught cheating in a game that completely resets all progress about twice a year, especially if they aren't rage cheating. And the answer is honestly very simple. It's about money. I believe there are 2 major ways for cheaters to make real money while playing Tarkov. One is called RMT, and the other one is providing a carry or carry service. Real money trading, or RMT, has been around in the gaming world at least as far back as 1989. But the first note I can find about it being made illegal is from 1999. Players were offering items from the game EverQuest for real money up for auction on eBay. Sony, being the game's publisher, not only banned EverQuest accounts engaging in this, but even asked eBay to remove all EverQuest-related auctions for violating the game's IP. Now fast forward to today, and RMT, though illegal in Tarkov and many other games, is an absolute booming business. It takes nothing but a quick Google search to find dozens of websites where you can allegedly trade real-life money for items in a vast array of games, Tarkov being one of them. It seems very silly to pay real-life money for anything in Tarkov, as the game wipes all progress every so often, but clearly there has to be a large customer base seeing the large amount of RMT websites selling Tarkov-related items. I think this is directly related to the fact that Tarkov is a rather hardcore, unforgiving game. People who pay for RMT services may either be hesitant to download cheats themselves, or they just want to skip the grind and play with endgame gear without having to spend dozens or hundreds of hours each wipe to get to that point themselves. Tarkov's developers have added a lot of steps to try and counter RMTing. One of their biggest and most controversial attempts was to add the Found in Raid, or FIR system. Without getting into too much detail, this basically means that players, legit or not, can't drop certain items in-game to be picked up by other people anymore. Another attempt to counter RMTing was to limit what can be sold and bought on the in-game Fleamarket, basically a server-wide marketplace where players can directly trade items without having to go into a raid to do so. These changes have, however, not really impacted RMT operators as badly as one might think. Now, instead of going into a raid, hunting down a specific item, and then selling it to a buyer in a different raid, they just invite the buyer into a party and go into multiple raids until the item is found. Now, you might understand that for the RMT operators to find certain items, especially hard to find ones, they have to be using cheats. But they don't want to be using cheats as obviously as the rage cheaters. Instead, they are the more undercover cheaters. The RMT operator wants to make the most money possible after paying Tarkov's developer for a copy of the game and the cheat creator for the use of their cheats. The longer they can keep their account unbanned, the more items they can save up to potentially sell to interested players. Some of the most sought after gear in Tarkov actually doesn't have to deal with the Found in Raid system when we think of high-end ammo, armor, modded weapons, or even thermal optics or thermal night vision. This means that these RMT operators can traverse maps, evading players that they'd rather not engage with, as they can see where the most valuable loot is spawning in that raid. However, if they see a boss NPC or a player with higher end gear, they will not shy away from killing them, though perhaps not as an obvious cheater with perfect aim or flying towards them across the map, but the fact that they know where players are at any given moment and in what direction they're even looking is already enough to give them an insane edge in a fight with a legit non-cheating player. They then advertise the gear they got from the player online to anyone willing to buy it. The other way cheaters make money in Tarkov is through doing something called a carry or carry service. You pay someone real money to either play on your account, which is against the terms of service by the way, though some streamers do this publicly to grind certain endgame quests, or they invite you to an in-game group and play alongside you for X number of raids. These carry services usually advertise getting a certain amount of loot, giving you access to all the high-end gear on the map, including NPC bosses, or just helping you complete harder quests. And though I'd love to think that very experienced, legit players are offering their services, You have to understand that the absolute vast majority, if not basically all paid carry services, are done by cheaters. By cheating, they can successfully carry as many players as possible in the shortest amount of time. They can see the loot, NPCs, and other players using their cheats and then decide to engage or hide, whichever they prefer. Now, I think these secret cheaters are a lot more dangerous to the game than the obvious cheaters who fly around the map while being invincible. These cheaters lay low and use the upper hand that their radar and ESP gives them to either evade legit players or set up ambushes on them. Other than that, they may rush certain loot spawns knowing where the highly sought after items are, or hunt down NPC bosses, ruining the chance for legit players to get their hands on these items or the boss's unique gear. These cheaters are also not going to be reported as often in-game, as most players will think they simply just got outplayed, though they technically did, just not legitimately. This allows these types of cheaters to continue cheating on one account for way longer than the average obvious rage cheater. As I'm writing the script for this video, the game's lead developer Nikita has since posted an indirect response to Goat's cheating video. In it, he claims that they are banning several thousands of cheaters a day, and usually most of them are banned after just playing for a little while. Also, a feature coming to the game soon, the in-game reporting system will now notify players if a person they reported for cheating actually got banned for cheating, which I do think is a good and very needed change. Just get some feedback on your reports. Some people in the comments though were very quick to notice that the general vibe of his post is very similar to posts from 2 or 3 years ago, and my personal view is that actions just speak way louder than words. If they are indeed banning several thousand cheaters a day, even sharing just a screenshot or a list of names once a week or even once a month would greatly increase the overall view the community has of the developers' anti-cheat methods. But I feel that just stating you're banning people without basic proof is not enough. One thing I personally would love to see, and that's been mentioned millions of times, is the addition of a raid replay system, where after a raid has ended and all players have either left or died, you can rewatch a raid from a free camera perspective and see what transpired during it and perhaps view your suspicious death. Tarkov has had issues with cheaters as far back as I can remember, even when I first started playing the game in early to mid 2017. To be honest, the video by Goat has just put into perspective just how many of your raids can potentially be affected by at least one cheater. Whether this is a cheater who just wants to kill you by flying around the map while being invincible, or if it's someone who uses their cheats to evade players and get highly sought after in-game loot, isn't really important to me. Both types of cheaters are obviously bad for Tarkov. I'd like to think that Tarkov's developers are trying to stop the cheating epidemic. However, the usual lack of communication, and this latest Reddit post is really an exception to the rule, or visible proof of this, makes it hard to believe. It takes just a very quick look at the in-game Fleamarket to see some very suspicious players who are very high level, who clearly aren't banned after spending probably hundreds of hours in the game since the last wipe in December of last year. I personally really enjoy playing Escape from Tarkov, and until Goat's video, I'd usually tell myself after dying in a suspicious way that it was just a bad play on my end. But with 3/5 of your raids having at least one obvious cheater in it, per his statistical findings, it does put things into perspective. And I'd say it's very noticeable when you bring in higher end, more expensive, or harder to acquire gear into a raid. Now, I don't know what the solution is to Tarkov's cheating epidemic, but I do know that something like a replay system would go a long way to potentially getting rid of the more obvious cheaters. Now, what do you think would be a good solution for dealing with cheaters in Escape from Tarkov, especially those more hidden, opportunistic cheaters? Let me know down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.